Welcome to NARAL's The Morning After. Each Thursday, our podcast brings you the latest on reproductive health care, progressive politics, and the fight to keep abortion safe and legal. NARAL's The Morning After is a production of NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at ProChoiceOH. Enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm Jaime.
Hi, I'm Jasmine.
Hi, I'm Gabe. Welcome back, Jasmine Burnett.
Yeah.
You were on this show a long time ago.
I know. So much has happened.
We were very grateful for you to come on and talk to us with Latasha Mays back then about New Voices.
Mm-hmm.
What's up with New Voices now?
Wow. New Voices has grown so much. I think when we first spoke, when we were doing the podcast initially, we didn't even have an office space. And now we have an office space. We have 2 staff members in the Cleveland office. So we're growing so much and it's exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
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 So New Voices for Reproductive Justice. A lot of the stuff on your website says Pittsburgh, but you are Cleveland.
Yeah. So I'm so happy that we're going through a rebranding of our organization because yes, we've expanded so quickly over the last 3 years. And a part of our expansion has included our rebranding and, trying to get a number of people to agree on a logo is quite a tedious process.
I'm sure.
And so
Yeah.
that we're going to be actually rolling out our new brand during our Women of Color History Month, which is going to happen February 15th through March 15th, 2018.
Oh,
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited.
So then it'll
Heard
be
it
New
first
Voices
here.
for Reproductive Justice.
Okay. Yeah, as somebody who's gone through one organizational rebrand with Planned Parenthood and now NARAL's thinking of changing some stuff around, it's so much easier when you're just handed the product and here is your new logo. It's like, oh, I don't have to decide anything.
No.
I'm just going to stick this on the email.
Yeah, it's not that easy this time.
Group processes, aren't they fun?
They are consensus. It's a thing.
Okay. So we've got a whole agenda to talk about here today. We put a bit of fluff up at the top. Did you watch the Emmys on Sunday?
I did not watch the Emmys, but I did see so many great snippets from folks. And I just want to lift up Issa Rae as who is the creator of the HBO special. Why is it slipping my mind right now?
Because that's what happens.
Because that's what happens. Well, Issa Rae, she said she's rooting for all Black people. They were like, who are you rooting for? I'm rooting for all Black people. And I think that she really echoed our sentiments that, Black folks' sentiments whenever we see any award show, whenever we are watching a sport, whenever we are watching anything where we're typically and historically not our talent, our vision for our lives and how we present that to the world isn't honored. So I was like, that is right on point with where all of the Black people, how all the Black people are feeling. So it was great. And I just loved everyone was joyous. Everyone was great. There was like queer folks of color getting awarded.
Yeah.
It was just like dreamy. And to be in the nightmare of this political environment, those are the types of things that keep us going.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Issa Rae's show is Insecure. It came to me. You see what happens?
You just got to move on from it sometimes, and it like pops back in your brain again.
I was just going to tell you that because I Googled it.
Yes.
It was a great. I thought it was a great show. The highlight for me was also a win for a woman of color. Lena Waithe won for Master of None, which have you guys watched the show at all?
Have not.
I watched like a couple of
Really
episodes,
good.
but
okay.
really.
So she's the first Black woman ever to win in the category of writing for a comedy series. So she won along with Aziz Ansari, who everybody knows from Parks and Recreation. He is in the second season of Master of None. you know, he is Indian American, and he and his writing partner won in the same category last year. So, you know, all of the people who are rooting for Southeast Asia, you know, they were very excited, you know, for him to win.
Absolutely.
But then when he won this year, it was co-writing with Lena Waithe. They won for an episode in the second season that I cannot talk about enough. It's called Thanksgiving. So the show is good. Like, the first season is definitely worth watching. The second season, they really get the writing right. But there's this episode that's almost like a standalone episode. Like, you don't need to know the plot for the rest of the characters or anything. It's just Aziz and his friend, who's played by Lena Waithe. The two of them in the early 90s. And so it starts off with a couple of these child actors, and it's every year, and I'm not giving away any spoilers here. This is established in like the first scene. It's them on Thanksgiving every year because, you know, they are this, you know, Black family in New York, several women. Angela Bassett plays the mom. So immediately, you know, she's not in the rest of the series, but you're like, wait a minute, that's Angela Bassett. Something's going on here. That's your first clue. This is going to be a good episode. It's the two of them at Thanksgiving as children, because these Black women, 3 Black women in the household are having, you know, Thanksgiving dinner. And because he's Indian, his family doesn't do Thanksgiving. So they invite him over, and he just becomes part of the family. And so you sort of see the episode through his eyes. But if you've watched the entire series, you know that she's a gay Black woman. But we're meeting her for the first time now as a child. And so we see these series of, you know, what their Thanksgiving dinner was like when they were like 8 or 12 and 16. And you see them grow up. And it's some of the like most tender, beautiful writing telling her story of being a Black lesbian through a series of consecutive Thanksgiving dinners. It's amazing storytelling.
Wow. I definitely need to watch that.
Yeah.
As a Black lesbian. I think that Lena, I have not seen that show, and it's because, you know, with work and travel, I don't have much time to keep up with what's going on. But I love that she took a picture, like she was photographed with her partner, and it was a very affectionate picture, and it wasn't like, oh, we're out, but we're not trying to act like we're together, you know, because that tends to happen too. But they were just very much together and very much out and proud. And that for me feels good. I'm coming up on my 20th gay anniversary in 2018. So that meant a lot to me to see that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So you got to check that episode out. It's in the second season. The rest of the season is great.
Yeah.
But that episode, you know, it was just a terrific episode.
Yeah.
So highly recommend it.
Sure.
Donald Glover also won in the Emmys. He's the first Black man to win for the directing category for his show Atlanta. And what's, I think, amazing there is here he's directing this TV show and winning awards for it, but then he also put out like the most amazing album. You know, Childish Gambino.
Yes.
It's just incredible music. So to be doing both of those things at the same time, that's
so amazingly. Yes.
But then the thing that people got all angry about in the Emmys, and I'm not saying that they're wrong to be angry, was Sean Spicer got this big cameo, and everybody's so angry about that. So I think when people have opinions on Sean Spicer, they're totally entitled to. But I worry that becomes a distraction.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what tends to happen. You know, you kind of toss something in there to distract folks, and then you kind of get away from the meat of what you're actually trying to talk about.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was interesting for sure. It was hilarious actually to watch because nobody knew it was coming. So like the cameras were perfectly poised on a couple of people who like it had really amazing, like the shocked faces on everybody. And Melissa McCarthy's face was hilarious. But, you know, everybody was kind of shocked that he was actually there. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree that, you know, the way they celebrated him putting fake news out there into the world on behalf of this administration was not probably the best decision ever. But no, I agree. All these things are distractions about what's really going on in a lot of ways.
Right.
You know, yeah, fake news is bad, and that celebrating that is definitely a bad thing, but they're about to, repeal the Affordable Care Act, and they're about to, repeal DACA, and all of these really, really bad things that we need to keep talking about.
Right. Yeah, that's the question that comes into my mind is, and it was the same thing during a lot of the sort of side discussions that happened during the Charlottesville thing.
Mm-hmm.
There was very important issues to talk about. The fact that somebody died was important. The fact that you had these neo-Nazis in the streets, that was important to talk about. And then there was like stupid stuff on the side, like Tina Fey and her sheet cake thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of see Sean Spicer as being the same thing. How do we determine when there's so much discussion, especially on social media, of a thing, what is really worth our time and what is just complete crap that we should disregard because we're just spinning gears worrying about something that doesn't actually impact people's lives?
Or it's like, could we organize ourselves and say, okay, we're all going to take a day where we're going to identify what is critical about the news, because honestly, it is overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And to continuously, things happen every day, and to connect it to the thing that happened the day before that and the day before that, it's like, how do we make sense of it?
Mm-hmm.
That is where I am with the news. It's like sometimes I'm really, really into it, and then most times I just back all the way up and get like updates through CNN or what have you, because it's just seeing the talking heads is overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
And seeing how convicted they are around harming people, and putting that message out there is challenging, and it's traumatizing. So yeah, I think that we need to group up and figure that out.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot of, like, right after the inauguration, I had a couple of friends who were keeping the daily rundown of like the crazy shit that happened today, because it's all important to a degree. I mean, we needed to have the conversation about the sheet cake. Did we need to have as much of the conversation about it? Possibly not. We needed to point out that Sean Spicer being there and celebrating fake news is bad, but does it need to be the focus of what we talk about? So like those little things do matter because they add up to this broader culture that we live in of bull crap. I'm trying not to cuss. And but so I feel like we were trying to be vigilant on that at the beginning, and then I think it did. It got so overwhelming. I would go to this person's Facebook page every day and like start to try to see, and then like it's like, oh. So I think we stopped like paying as much attention, and we need to not do that because it is important in all those ways.
And I think when I think about the news, I think about an experience I just had at the National Association of Black Journalists Conference in New Orleans. And Omarosa Manigault Newman was asked to speak on a police brutality panel. And I really didn't understand why. But she was invited. They wanted to have a balanced narrative. She was presenting in front of journalists who write and are talking heads for many outlets, and she said some really challenging things. So I think that the media is trying to be balanced by having folks from the administration come in and maybe see how they interact with the broader community of folks, but I don't think it ever ends well when they do that. So, maybe they need to think about their message and their representatives. And let's start there.
Right. Especially when we've got an entire administration that's clearly built on creating distractions. So many things that the Trump White House does, it's very transparent to me that they're just creating something to make people go off and talk about this, this topic, whatever it is that they've kicked up. And pay no attention to the evil things that we're doing over here, because here's this horrible distraction. And I think to a large part, we have more than just this administration. We have a society full of systems that do that. So,
It's all fear.
Yeah. But keeping focus on, on fighting down actual threats, and then lifting up good programs is where we should be putting our attention.
Yeah.
So speaking of good programs.
You transitioned in the exact way that my brain was about to. Good job, Gabe. You read my mind.
So go ahead.
So you keyed us into some amazing polling before it was even really publicly out there, which was fabulous and amazing, and we appreciated it, from a project called In Our Own Voice. And I wanted to spend some time talking about that today because you sent me the link the day I asked for it, and I started reading the very long, amazing report, and I had to actually like physically force myself to close the window on my computer because I had other work to do. So it's really amazing, and I want people to know about it.
So the In Our Own Voice is a national Black reproductive justice agenda. It's a federal strategy to make sure that we establish a leadership voice for Black women at the national level, that we build a coordinated grassroots movement for Black women, specifically looking at issues of abortion access, contraceptive equity, and comp sex ed. We also want to engage and motivate Black women as a traditionally underrepresented group. We have a strong voting power, which was evidenced in this last presidential election to the tune of 94%. So we did some listening sessions. So let me back up a bit. So In Our Own Voice is a collective, is an organization that brings together Black RJ-led organizations across the country.
Okay.
My organization, New Voices for Reproductive Justice, we represent Pennsylvania and Ohio. There's Sister Reach in Memphis, Tennessee, Black Women for Wellness in Los Angeles, California, Women with a Vision in New Orleans, Louisiana, the AFIA Center in Dallas, Texas. There's a National Black Women's Health Imperative in DC. So we come together at least once a year to create what our policy strategies are going to be, what our organizing strategies are going to be. What's dynamic about the space is that we're able to really pull the best of our strategies and our knowledge together and really talk about how we share them in one room.
Okay.
And so that is really built out of this report and how we developed it. So we had polling data at first, which looked at what are African-American attitudes around abortion access, interpersonal violence against women, a number of other issues, abortion access, comp sex ed. And so we polled communities. We had listening sessions in all of the cities where the organizations are based. And we polled Black women about these issues. They were able to tell us things that we were just not aware of. I think we operate a lot in this movement as if, because we have all the information that everyone knows this, but people just do not know. So one of the things that was really telling for us is, people were very unaware around how they're being lied to by legislators who are not doctors.
Right.
So that's a thing. And they felt very betrayed. And when you think about the long history of betrayal in the medical establishment with Black women, starting with Dr. J. Marion Sims on the plantation, it has not gotten much better since then. And, places like crisis pregnancy centers don't make it much better either. Right. So we wanted to make sure that we created a report that folks could go to and use as a resource so that when they do advocate for their rights, that they have accurate information that reflects the lived experiences of Black women, girls, and femmes.
So this is something that people can find today and read.
Absolutely. So just go to the website, www.black, as in reproductive, J as in justice.org. You can find the report, which is called Our Bodies, Our Lives, Our Voices, the State of Black Women in Reproductive Justice.
Hey, here it is. I found it.
Yes.
Okay.
As I learned, just do it at a time when you can actually sit down and read it, because you're going to want to sit down and read it. So
Because one of the things that, well, there are three things that really motivated this report, which is looking at the Affordable Care Act and the healthcare that it provided for millions of Black families across this country. Really reflecting on the whole women's health, the Hellerstedt, which reaffirmed women's access to abortion, and looking at the Black Lives Matter movement, which we're very deeply aligned with and connected with, and lifts up the leadership of queer and youth-led movement building that is necessary right now for our survival.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's deep trying to survive in these streets.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll put a link to the report in the show notes. So.
And I think you guys talked about a lot of, I was on vacation last week. So Gabe got to do a lot of fun stuff that that you guys talked about last week. But I think one of the things that probably didn't get talked about much on September 12th, because there were like 14 other things going on that same day,
right,
was that both Cleveland and Toledo, I think that's it, maybe Cincinnati, I don't know, several cities across Ohio, not Columbus, had their primary local elections that day.
Yes. So a big part of our work at New Voices for Reproductive Justice is integrated voter engagement. And that is a program that engages women, folks of color in the political process. So we do political education on the issues, not the candidates, because we're a C3 organization.
Right.
So we make sure that people are registered to vote, that they know who their candidates are, and that they understand what issues they're lifting up as important. And we try to get a better understanding through our phone banking, through our canvassing throughout the year, what issues are actually important to the constituents that people are attempting to represent. And to the degree that those issues are not represented by those legislators, that is where we come in with our policy advocacy, community organizing, and leadership development programs to really push for folks to be accountable to their constituents, because that's what this is about. That's why you get their vote.
Well, and I think one of my biggest frustrations doing the political work we do is how everybody focuses on, oh my God, I got to vote for the president.
Yes. And that is such... The environment that we're in now is really pushing us to focus more on the municipal and state elections, because that is where people live. People live in their cities and they're affected by the policies that happen at the state level.
Right.
And so that, I don't know how deeply we're being heard at the federal level, particularly on our issues. It doesn't seem to be very optimistic, but I do feel that we have a lot of power at the local level. And so that is what we're really pushing for at New Voices. We believe that the local elections are critical, that there's a lot of movement that we can do at the neighborhood level, even just to make sure that people in their immediate environment, where they live, where they raise their children, where they work, where they go to school, where they go to church, that they are safe, that they are protected, that they have the resources and the supports that they need to live full and healthy lives.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, and the message that I think all of us wanted, to get across is know who your people are. I mean, I think so often when you get down ticket in these things to, smaller state elections and the local elections, you just don't even know. So these are people in your community. I mean, if anything, it should be really easy to be able to run into at some point in your area one of these people who's running. So really learn who your candidates are, and make sure that you get out and vote this November, because whether or not you had a primary last week, election day is in November, and the first Tuesday of November, I don't even remember what the date is this year.
It's the 7th.
7th. There you go. Jasmine's got it.
Very good.
Good job. And so get out there and vote.
Please vote
for mayor in several cities, for city council in most of the cities, and get out there, vote, learn about your candidates, and do your duty.
Yeah. So this brings up two thoughts in my mind. The first being that One of the complaints that I hear quite frequently about the Democratic Party, especially here in Ohio, is that we don't have a deep bench.
Mm-hmm.
We have some great leaders at the top. Sherrod Brown, I think, is like the best U.S. senator that there is. Here in Columbus, I'm very spoiled because we've got Joyce Beatty, who I am thrilled with as, my representative in Congress. In other districts, however, sometimes, there's a struggle to find, a pro-choice candidate to challenge, whoever the incumbent is, or if there's an open seat. Are we developing good candidates at, at that congressional level? The exact same thing happens at the state. And if we start to approach local level candidates with some of this issue advocacy, we help develop city council members, county commissioners, people who are on their way up. Get them early, so that we're not doing, I'm going to pick on Tim Ryan here, but, he got to Congress and then made the conversion to become a pro-choice candidate. That's terrific. If we had more of that conversation going on when he was state senator, Tim Ryan, then we would have gotten the benefit of having a pro-choice, elected official that much earlier in the game.
Yeah.
So, talking with candidates about important issues like this, even if it's not something that they're, voting on right away, but just talking with them about the topics, making sure they understand what constituencies they're representing, that helps. That's how we create a deep bench.
Yeah,
that's right.
And then, so that was the first thought that came to mind. The second thought was there's this massive conversation about the Democratic Party being a big tent. And should the party make room for people who don't support abortion rights? And so if your concern is that the Democratic Party is supporting candidates that don't share your values, a great solution is to find organizations that do share your values, that are working either to promote issues like New Voices is, or NARAL, who's working to elect only pro-choice candidates, and invest your money there, make your donations there instead of to a party organization that is primarily looking to just continue to be a party.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like invest in people who are invested in your humanity. Invest in organizations that support you living your best life and raising your family and having the resources that you need. Invest in organizations that aren't going to compromise you in any way. I think that people are making a lot of compromises at the expense of real people. So I think that, New Voices, we have a very strong line. NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio is one of our beloved partners in Ohio. And, we really have to deepen our resolve around our issues, especially for some of our legislators who are wavering in that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's deep breath.
Right.
Now, but moving from micro local to massive national issues. There's really no transition there.
No, it's all good.
Looking at things that are important at the national level. You need to learn the name Graham Cassidy Heller.
Why?
Tell us about Graham.
Graham Cassidy Heller is what you wrote down here as zombie repeal.
Isn't zombie repeal so much more fun?
Right.
It is. I like it.
Well, it's the Walking Dead season in Washington, D.C. The Republican Party is taking their next shot at repealing the Affordable Care Act. So I've got a long list. I won't read it all here of things that Graham Cassidy Heller ACA repeal would do. It's going to be an estimated 32 million people losing coverage within 10 years. This would end Medicaid expansion, end all subsidies for the exchange that get replaced by smaller block grants. But block grants don't have to be spent on the same population.
Yeah.
So that's code for shifting money around to people that needed that coverage before.
Yeah.
It's going to cut coverage for low-income seniors, children, and people with disabilities. Ends federal protection on pre-existing conditions, lifetime caps, and essential benefits. And then half of states are expected to follow through. Ends all cost-sharing payments to low-income Americans. Ends all funding for coverage by 2026. I mean, just nasty. The list goes on and on. We'll put some of this information in the show notes, but I mean, these are really terrible things.
Yes,
these are why you
awful.
need to stop talking about Sean Spicer, because Graham Cassidy, it's not a name that you know, but it's going to really, really hurt people.
Yeah. So once again, we need to start calling our senators, call Sherrod Brown and say thank you for always being there. And he, make sure that he knows that there's love out there for him, and then pick up the phone and make the bad call to Rob Portman and tell him that he needs to make sure people have access to health care, because they're unfortunately the ones who get the vote in this one.
Right.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like, how can, as I hear you reading all of the things and all of the people who are going to be harmed by this, I wonder how they can sleep at night.
Yeah.
Knowing that they are going to essentially be destroying families. It's disgusting. So I certainly do hope that folks will exercise their right and call their legislators, because, I think you don't think it's going to happen to you until your family shows up for healthcare and doesn't have the coverage. And then you're like, oh man, I should have called. Don't have any regrets. Don't have remorse about your advocacy and what you could have done. Just do it. There is no time to be lazy about this. Healthcare is critical. We all know that. We all have loved ones in our families who need it. We all have people who we loved that need it. So please, please, please do that. Don't be lazy. It's just, this is not the time, friends.
You ask, how do they sleep at night? And I'm guessing that they sleep very comfortably on a king-size bed in a really fancy house paid for by donations from the insurance industry.
I bet you're absolutely right, Gabe.
Although I can't imagine even that the insurance industry is happy about this shit, because I mean, it's gonna kind of really screw them up too, because it was the required coverage and those kinds of things that made this stuff all work in the first place. But
they've got a big lobby, so if they want to defeat this, they've got the ability to. On this list, it kind of shows where some people's priorities are. Down second from the bottom, targets women's health / family planning. So it's not like this just affects all people universally. It targets certain populations.
Yeah, like the ones who need it the most, but whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Why care about those people?
Yeah.
That's not me. I don't need to care,
Right.
We're a little downer today.
Yeah, we are.
A
So
little jaded.
yes. And speaking of being jaded, we're more than halfway into our first year under a new presidential administration.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's been a couple months. I can't believe it's almost October. Like that, my brain is not comprehending that piece of the puzzle for sure. And we had a call this morning, and I was thinking that we had presented something to legislators like last fall, and it was actually January. And so, like, in a lot of ways, it feels like it's been a really long 9 months, and in other ways, it feels like it's been a very short period of time. It's my brain doesn't know quite how to wrap around the whole thing.
Yeah, 9 months is a significant number. It's like, what has this country given birth to? And
Bad thing.
And, how are people in this country responding to this birth, right? We talk about reproduction, and it's like we've birthed something really, I don't have a word for it.
It's an ugly baby.
It's an ugly baby. And there are no ugly babies, friends. But this baby is ugly.
And it's hurting a lot of people pretty continuously.
Yes, it is.
Right.
So how are we fighting back? Because, resistance is not new. Our resistance is not new. And I think that if we look historically at how far we've come, we know that when you are on the side of justice, that you always win. It may be not in your lifetime, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that is what we're rubbing up against, that, you know, we've had the experience of having certain liberties and freedoms and being able to move and navigate and understand our rights in a particular way. And now we're being set back to then create something anew that can hold us in the next century, the next generation, you know, the next in our, you know, in our future generations. So I think that that's what I sit with. I sit with having the experience of that, of both, and understanding that I may not see the beauty that this will become when we do transition power.
Yeah. And I think there are also the tiny small victories.
There are. Yeah.
You know, this is a zombie ACA repeal because we, you know, created the zombie by killing it, you know, back in the middle of the summer. Or, you know, seeing that people who would have never stepped up and supported the DACA youth be like, no, you can't repeal DACA. That's going to hurt too many people. And seeing that we might actually get something out of it now. Like, I'm not holding my breath necessarily, but like watching the process kind of happen and see that there is some basement level where like there is maybe a population that we care enough about not hurting that we might want to do something finally about it, you know. And so kids brought over here when they were, you know, infants, not wanting to deport them to a country that they've never spent more than a, you know, week-long break with grandma in, you know, might be that basement. And I think that kind of gives me a little bit of a step forward, you know, and seeing all the people who marched in January and seeing the people who have stayed engaged. And that's kind of surprised me. You know, I was thinking everyone's going to march in January and then they're all going to go back home again and we're never going to see her from again. And people have, you know, not to that degree, but people have stayed engaged in a way that like we really haven't seen them stay engaged before.
Yeah.
And frankly, they've done a much better job than I expected them to. I'm paying attention to lots of different things happening. Like being able to switch gears in so many of these things has been, you know, something really interesting to watch. Sometimes I'm still like, come on, that's not what you need to be focused on. But, you know, I'd prefer a little more local and state focus on some of these things. But no, I think it's been long, but it's also been inspiring in a lot of ways.
Right.
I want to, speaking of marches, I wanted to lift up the March for Black Women that's happening on September 30th. And it's happening in DC, Washington, DC. The conveners and organizers of the march are Black Women's Blueprint, BYP 100, and the Trans Sisters of Color Project. So New Voices will definitely be attending that march. And, you know, given the last march that happened in January in DC, I am hoping that we are granted the same level of safety, protection, and freedom to assemble as those women were.
Right.
Especially because what we're calling for is an apology to all Black women for centuries of abuses, including sexual violence, reproductive violations. We're ensuring we want economic justice. I don't understand why there are so many studies that happen that show the disparities in income for Black women and white women and Latino women, and you know, and what that looks like on a gender analysis with like men, and there's still nothing done about it. It's like enough already. And to cease and desist with all the threats of deportation of immigrant women across the country. When we think about all of the things that have impacted Black women, one of the things that I think about is really raw for me is Kanika Jenkins in Chicago. She was a 19-year-old woman who was a victim of sexual violence, and they don't know what the results, if she was murdered or what have you, but she died. And when I think about how people responded to that and just the silence around when Black women are harmed, and that we are typically the only ones who lift up that harm and hold that trauma for each other. This is why this march is important, because we have to be very visible. We were visible with our vote, and we have been shown through this administration how invisible we actually are. We have Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who is really leading an amazing charge. And she says everything that we feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that has been refreshing. However, we all, I think about, I have a 23-year-old cousin who lives in my hometown in Indiana, and I worry about her because I know the racial dynamics in Indiana are a lot harsher than they are here in Ohio. And that's not saying much.
Right.
But I want to lift up how we are fighting back, and also the very real concerns around being visible, and actually assembling. So again, I hope, it is my fervent hope, that we have the same protections that the women who marched in the Women's March in DC in January had. We have no interactions with vigilantes, that we are protected at the same level, if not more, because the threats are greater. So that is my call, and that is what we're doing to resist. And I'm very excited about the march.
Me too. I can't wait to see.
Yeah.
So there's information about this event on the New Voices Facebook page under the events. I just earlier this morning added it to our set of events, so it'll take you to the official Facebook event for the March for Black Women, Saturday, September 30th from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., Washington, D.C. So get that information. Should be a terrific march.
It will be. Put that out into the universe.
It will be a terrific march. I mean, we're planning to be visible. I mean, seeing all of the things that have come out of the fact that our 94% vote has not been acknowledged or held by this administration, has shown that we definitely need to be more visible than we already are. I mean, our visibility is undeniable, but making us visible in a way that actually matters and counts to us is what we're talking about.
Right.
So, we have nothing to lose. At this point, we are protecting our families today and for future generations. And so we want them to know that we cared about them.
Right.
And that we cared enough about ourselves to fight back.
And this should be a peaceful and safe march. I know that you mentioned, you mentioned that you have a hope that it's, a successful and safe event, considering last weekend when they had the juggalos in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and then like 24 white supremacists down in front of their stage. If all of those events can happen in DC, then there shouldn't be any reason for DC police or federal agents to see this as anything other than a positive event coming to Washington.
Yeah.
As I look across the country at all the other things going on, demonstrations, what's happening in St. Louis right now. So it's good to have a nice positive event.
Yes.
And hopefully it isn't ruined.
That's the hope. I mean, we are coming in peace. We are also coming in resistance, because this is, it's not okay what's happening. And I'm not, and we're coming to peacefully assemble and to show Black women that we care, and that we are holding them, and that we will fight for them, and that we will advocate for them, for us. And so that is our intention. However, there are some very real concerns based on, the ways that we have always assembled peacefully. And there has always been a particular reaction to us exercising our rights. So I want to encourage those who have cousins in DC who maybe work for the FBI or law enforcement to just whisper in their ear. If you have a white supremacist cousin, just say, hey, friend, don't do that. Just intervene on our behalf. Thank you very much.
I like that call to action. It's a good one.
Thank you.
Should always do that. Yes. So,
Maxine Waters, Congresswoman Waters, has become a terrific voice.
Auntie Maxine.
Yeah. I worry though, as a white guy, there's I see some kind of pushback about it's tough to describe. There's a balance of listening to Black women, which is a positive thing, but then not putting all of the responsibility on their shoulders. And I heard the same thing in discussions of Michelle Obama, and everyone is saying, oh my God, Michelle Obama needs to run for president. And that would be an amazing positive thing, but not expecting Michelle Obama to somehow swoop in and save us all when it's the responsibility of everybody in this country to create positive change, and not to put the onus for that on one woman, on one Black woman. So
it's like they want us to experience our oppression and fix it.
Come on, Jasmine. Seriously, what's your problem?
I know.
And I think it goes back to your election stuff too. For so many years, we had relied on Black women to save us. I mean, this election was not the first time that white women failed miserably at voting for a decent human being. Let's just put it that way. And so we've relied on Black women to save us a lot as a population in elections. And so, yeah, we see that there too. And the fact that, we don't blame who needs to be blamed. 94% of Black women
we tried to save the world.
Couldn't overcome the 56% of white women.
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, that happens on an individual level with Maxine Waters, Congressman Waters, and Michelle Obama, but then happens on this population level too, with elections and anti-poverty work and all of these different things.
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
I think it's a concept for a lot of white people is difficult to kind of wrap their heads around. I couldn't even explain it without tripping over my tongue right there. But I think it's something to consider.
For sure.
Okay. So March for Black Women, September 30th.
Yes.
Okay.
From good stuff to bad stuff.
Yeah.
Again, we're kind of bipolar in this.
It's the seesaw discussion agenda. What do you have in the bad category?
So the Ohio legislature is back, and in general, 90% of the time, that's a bad news.
Right.
So you guys talked a lot about the Down syndrome abortion bans last week because there was a hearing last week. We're recording on Tuesday instead of Thursday, so this hasn't happened yet, so we can't really talk about it, but just want to let people know that the Senate kind of pushed pause on their bill, but the House is ramming theirs through. So
the Senate has pushed pause after hearing terrific testimony.
Yes.
People didn't get to hear about that in last week's show.
Sorry. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, because we recorded last week's show before the hearing. Kelly Copeland, our executive director, did a terrific job testifying. The highlight of that hearing, though, was parents who sent in testimony, but then doctors and medical students who stepped up and provided a voice from from the medical community on why this Down syndrome ban is not based in any sort of medically beneficial or scientifically thought out reasoning. And so they were providing some expert testimony on why this bill should not move forward. That's what happened in the Senate that we didn't have a chance to talk about last week. There's video. We'll put a link to the video if you want to watch the hearing. It was really great. So that was last week.
Yes.
So now this week. Sorry.
So now
Please
this
continue.
week. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you guys talked about it last week.
No.
And so this week the House is going to have the second hearing. So it's just supporters of the bill testifying. So that will happen tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, at 9 a.m. And then stay tuned because most likely 99% sure opponent testimony will happen the following Wednesday on 9/27. So 9/27 at 9 a.m. we'll probably do a crowd build and get supporters there for the opposition testimony hearing. We'll make a Facebook event, so just kind of keep an eye on our Facebook page. The House bill and the Senate bill are identical. There's really nothing different, but the Senate can't pass their bill and the House can't pass their bill and then like make it work. Like one of the other chambers is going to have to.
They don't merge together.
Yes. So, we'll still have to go through the other chamber with the other bill, depending on which one moves faster than the other one. So stay tuned for updates on that bad abortion bill. And then on the kind of connected with the ACA zombie repeal bill, the zombie that keeps coming back in Ohio of dismantling Ohio's Medicaid expansion program is also now being talked about again. It was in the budget bill to phase out the Medicaid expansion. Kasich line item vetoed that out of the bill to preserve Medicaid expansion. The House went through and did a whole bunch of veto overrides in June. That was not one of them. So we preserved Medicaid expansion through that round, but they're now talking about bringing the House back and doing another veto override of that protection of the Medicaid expansion. So they're negotiating that too. So we'll see if millions of people in Ohio will lose access to their Medicaid coverage because Ohio legislators are being jerks. So those two things are happening in the Ohio State House this week. Fun.
Yay.
It'd be nice if good things happened in there. But stay tuned for that too. Someday.
We're going to make sure that good things happen there. We're pushing.
Yep.
We're pushing, friends.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So while we're on the topic of events, should we talk about things happening outside the State House?
Sure.
Let's get it on.
Mm-hmm.
On September 25th, up in Cleveland, the Feminists are having their September meeting. This is on our Facebook page. As always, link in the show notes. If you'd like to knit or crochet or do things with yarn and are pro-choice, this is your event.
Or if you just want to hang with other pro-choice people at Prosperity Social Club and hang out, that's cool too.
Yes. On September 25th. Information in the show notes. On September 30th, an Akron CPC protest.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we did a couple of these in Columbus and Cincinnati, I don't know, a month and a half ago.
Sure.
And so this is just kind of a spread of that. So we're going to protest outside of one of the crisis pregnancy centers in Akron that provides really misleading, bad information. And just make sure that people understand what kind of facility this is. This is not a healthcare facility, and actually provide information on where people can go to get healthcare in the Akron area.
Right. And then the last thing here, we took these out of chronological order.
Yes.
September 26th, preterm gets their day in court in front of the Ohio Supreme Court.
Yes.
That's at 9 a.m. So, 2 weeks ago we had our first day.
Mm-hmm.
Was it just last week?
Last week.
Yeah. We had our first ever hearing in front of the state Supreme Court. The court meets at 9 a.m. It's on Front Street in downtown Columbus. If you'd like to attend, it's an open court hearing. It's a little bit more subdued than the State House, so it's not a sign and T-shirt sort of thing.
No.
It's really sort of a just show up and sit in the back and watch and listen.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. The oral arguments are timed, so it's just each side presenting somewhere around 15 minutes of testimony plus questions. So the entire thing, if it starts at 9 a.m., I'm not sure that we're the first case in the docket.
I think it might be second.
But each case takes somewhere between 30 to 45 minutes, and then it's done and you're out. So, so that should be interesting.
And that's not even an argument on the merits of the case yet. They're actually arguing still whether or not preterm has standing to even bring the case. So it'll be a little bit. It'll be even a little bit different because preterm is challenging the heartbeat bill restrictions. So the mandatory ultrasound and the telling a woman a fetal heartbeat exists, and then the medically ambiguous information on whether or not the pregnancy will continue to viability that was passed in the 2013 budget. And the state is trying to argue that that preterm doesn't have standing because they say that it won't force them to close. It'll force them to do stupid things they shouldn't have to do, but it won't close them, so they don't have standing to bring the case because they're not going to be forced to close. It's complete BS, but whatever.
Right.
So yeah, so even if like we win at this level, they're gonna have to go back and start like actually arguing the case. And again, this has been a case that we filed in 2013.
Jeez.
So yeah, it took us 4 years to get to this point. God knows how much longer it's gonna take to actually finish the freaking case.
Right. Okay.
Yay!
So much fun. Okay. I think that's all we got. Jasmine, where can people find more information about New Voices?
You can go to our website at www.newvoicespittsburgh.org. We are also very active on all social media. We have an Instagram page, so it's New Voices PGH. We have multiple Facebook pages and Twitter accounts that you can follow for New Voices Cleveland, Philly, and Pittsburgh. We're very easy to find.
Cool.
Yay.
And we'll put links to those in the show notes. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah.
Thank you,
You're
Jaime.
Always welcome.
Always.
Okay. We'll talk to everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.